For 5 years, the billionaire kept stacks of cash displayed on a glass shelf in his study. $20,000. Just sitting there. Visible. Tempting. His accountant stared at it. His lawyer mentioned it. Even his own nephew couldn't resist. They all failed his test. Then his maid brought her 7-year-old son to work, and what that boy did when he saw that money while the old man pretended to sleep changed everything. Morgan David was worth $2.3 billion. But he displayed $20,000 in $100 bills on a glass shelf like it was art. Some people collected paintings. Morgan collected evidence. Penthouses in 3 countries, a car collection that could fund a small city, more zeros in his bank account than most people have in their phone numbers. But he was alone. Completely, utterly alone. His wife Margaret, the last person who loved him for himself, died 5 years ago. Since then, nothing but vultures circling his fortune. His nephew embezzled $2 million. His business partner tried to forge his signature on property deeds. Friends disappeared the moment he stopped writing checks. So Morgan stopped trusting anyone. He tested everyone. That glass shelf of cash? It wasn't decoration. It was a trap. He watched from hidden cameras or through cracked doors to see who could resist it, who'd ask about it, who'd stare at it a little too long. They always showed their true colors. Always. Then Janet Jackson showed up for the housekeeper position. Single mother, 32, desperate for work to keep her and her son in their apartment. She brought Mike with her, 7 years old, yellow rubber gloves too big for his little hands, ready to help Mama clean. Morgan watched them that first day. He waited for Janet to stare at that glass shelf of cash. Waited for the boy to ask why someone would just leave money sitting there. But nothing happened. Janet cleaned around it like it was any other shelf. Mike dusted near it without even looking twice. Day 1. Day 2. Day 3. They just worked. Cleaned. Went home. That's when Morgan decided. One more test. The ultimate test. He'd pretend to fall asleep in his study. The glass shelf of cash right there on the wall, his wallet open on the desk, expensive watch beside it. Then he'd see what that boy did when his mother wasn't watching. When nobody was watching. When $20,000 was an arm's reach away. Because Morgan knew the truth about people. Everyone has a price. Everyone breaks eventually. Even 7-year-olds with yellow gloves and innocent eyes. What Mike did next? Nobody saw it coming. Not even Morgan. Want to know what happened in that study? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. What happens next will shock you. Because Morgan knew the truth about people. Everyone has a price. Everyone shows their real face eventually. Even 7-year-olds. What he didn't know. The boy walking into that study with those oversized yellow gloves wasn't about to take anything. He was about to give Morgan something the old billionaire thought was gone forever. And when Morgan realized what just happened, he broke down and cried for the first time in 5 years. Want to know what Mike did? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. You need to see this. Morgan David's mansion had 47 rooms. Marble floors that echoed when you walked. Chandeliers imported from Italy. Art worth more than most people's houses hanging on walls that nobody looked at anymore. And in his study, mounted on the wall behind his desk, a glass shelf held $20,000 in crisp $100 bills. Stacked. Displayed. Visible to anyone who walked in. People always asked about it. Why do you keep cash just sitting there? His accountant had asked, nervous laugh in his throat. Aren't you worried about theft? Morgan would smile. Should I be? The accountant stared at it a moment too long. 3 weeks later, Morgan caught him skimming from expense accounts. Fired. His lawyer had been more direct. That's quite the statement piece, Morgan. What's it for? Art, Morgan had said simply. I collect human nature. The lawyer didn't understand. Not until Morgan discovered forged documents and confronted him. Then the lawyer understood perfectly. He'd been part of the collection all along. The glass shelf wasn't decoration. It was a mirror. Hold up $20,000 and watch what people become. Watch their eyes track to it during conversation. Watch them calculate. Watch them rationalize. Watch them fail. Because Morgan knew the truth about people. Everyone has a price. That glass shelf simply made it visible. The mansion was beautiful. The mansion was empty. The mansion was a testing ground for a man who'd lost faith in everything except evidence. Every morning, Morgan ate breakfast alone at a dining table built for 12. Scrambled eggs, black coffee, silence. His chef prepared the food and disappeared. No conversation. No good morning. Just the sound of silverware on fine china and Morgan's own breathing. He'd walk through hallways lined with photographs, Him and Margaret at their wedding, on vacation in Tuscany, at charity galas where they'd laugh like they owned the world. Which technically they did. Now those photos just reminded him of what he'd lost. The one person who looked at him and saw Morgan, not Morgan's money. After Margaret died, things changed fast. His nephew James, who used to call every week just to chat, suddenly needed loans for business ventures that never materialized. $2 million gone before Morgan realized James was gambling it away in Atlantic City. James had stood in this very study, staring at that glass shelf of cash, and said, "Uncle Morgan, you're so generous. Not everyone would help family like this." Generous. The word tasted like poison now. His college roommate reached out after 30 years of silence. They had dinner, caught up, laughed about old times. His friend had noticed the cash display and joked, "Still showing off, I see. Some things never change." 3 weeks later, Morgan's accountant noticed property documents with forged signatures. His old friend had tried to transfer ownership of Morgan's vacation home in Aspen. His own lawyer, the man who drafted his will, got caught billing for 80 hours a week while only working 20, padding expenses, charging Morgan's accounts for personal purchases. He'd sat in the chair across from that glass shelf, talking about trust and fiduciary duty, while planning to rob Morgan blind. Everyone wanted something. Nobody just wanted him. So Morgan kept the cash there. $20,000. A test that never ended. A question that everyone failed. He'd watch their eyes. First glance, natural curiosity. Second glance, calculation beginning. Third glance, rationalization forming. By the fourth glance, he knew. They'd already taken it in their minds. The physical theft was just a matter of time and opportunity. Morgan fired them all. Each betrayal confirmed what he already knew. People are fundamentally selfish. Give them opportunity, remove consequences, put $20,000 on a shelf, and they'll show you exactly who they are. His late wife used to tell him he was too cynical. "Not everyone's out to get you, Morgan," she'd say with that smile that made him believe anything was possible. "Some people are just good." But Margaret was wrong. 5 years of evidence proved it. Good people were a myth. The glass shelf proved it every single time. Morgan sat in his study now, leather chair worn comfortable from decades of use, whiskey he couldn't taste anymore, and a loneliness so deep it felt physical. That glass shelf gleamed in the afternoon light. 20,000 reasons to distrust everyone. The silence in this mansion wasn't just absence of sound. It was absence of life, of trust, of hope that anyone, anywhere, gave a damn about Morgan David the man instead of Morgan David the bank account. Tomorrow, his longtime housekeeper Mrs. Patterson would retire. She'd served him faithfully for 15 years, which was the closest thing to loyalty Morgan had experienced since Margaret died. She'd cleaned this study 1,000 times, dusted around that glass shelf, never once asked about the money. Maybe she'd passed the test. Or maybe she just knew she was being watched. Her replacement was coming for an interview at 2 p.m. Morgan had already planned the test. The glass shelf would be part of it. It was always part of it. Janet Jackson arrived at exactly 1:58 p.m. Not early enough to seem desperate, not late enough to seem unreliable. Morgan watched from the upstairs window as she parked a 2006 Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and rust along the bottom panels. She got out wearing a simple navy dress, clean, pressed, but clearly old. The hem had been mended. Then she opened the back door and a small boy climbed out. Morgan's jaw tightened. Nobody told him about a child. The boy was 7, maybe 8. Dark skin, close-cropped hair, enormous eyes that took in the mansion like he'd stepped onto another planet. He wore jeans with patches on the knees and a green t-shirt that had been washed so many times the color had faded to seafoam. In his small hands, he clutched a pair of yellow rubber gloves. Adult size. They swallowed his arms up to his elbows. Mrs. Patterson met them at the door. Morgan watched the exchange through the security feed. No audio, but he could read body language. Janet was apologizing, explaining. The boy stayed close to his mother, eyes down, trying to make himself smaller. Mrs. Patterson nodded, smiled at the boy, then gestured for them to follow her inside. Morgan's intercom buzzed. "Mr. David? Ms. Jackson is here for the interview. She brought her son. Summer break, no childcare. I told her it might be a problem, but—" "Send her up," Morgan interrupted. "Both of them." He positioned himself behind his desk. Power pose. Let them see who they're dealing with. Let them see the art, the books, the view of manicured gardens through floor-to-ceiling windows. And most importantly, let them see that glass shelf with $20,000 stacked like a dare. Janet appeared in the doorway, the boy slightly behind her. Her eyes took in the room, the luxury, the space, the obvious wealth. Then her gaze landed on the glass shelf and stopped. Morgan watched her face carefully. She registered what she was seeing, cash, lots of it, just sitting there. Her expression didn't change. No widening eyes. No quick calculation. She simply looked at it the way you'd look at a painting, then moved her attention back to Morgan. Interesting. She had good posture, shoulders back, eye contact steady. Nervous but hiding it well. Mr. David. She extended her hand. Firm grip. Thank you for seeing me. I'm Janet Jackson. This is my son, Mike. The boy stepped forward and did something unexpected. He extended his small hand, still wearing one of those ridiculous yellow gloves, and said in a clear, respectful voice, "Nice to meet you, sir." Morgan shook the tiny gloved hand. It was like holding a bunch of rubber bananas. "Why the gloves?" Morgan asked. Mike looked at his mother, who nodded permission to answer. "Mama got them for me so I can help her clean. I'm going to be her assistant." "Assistant," Morgan repeated, glancing at Janet. She had the grace to look embarrassed. "Mr. David, I apologize for bringing Mike. It's summer break, and my regular sitter fell through. If you'd prefer I come back another." "Sit." Morgan gestured to the chairs opposite his desk. Janet sat. Mike remained standing until his mother pulled him down beside her. From where they sat, that glass shelf was directly in their line of sight. $20,000. Morgan had positioned those chairs deliberately years ago. Maximum visibility. Maximum temptation. Mike's eyes found it immediately. He stared at the stacks of cash, mouth slightly open. Morgan waited for the question. Kids always asked, "Why is there money on the wall? Is that real? Can I touch it?" But Mike just looked at it for a long moment, then turned his attention to the telescope by the window. His eyes lit up. "Is that for looking at stars?" Morgan blinked. "Yes. That's so cool. Mama, look." Janet's hand gently guided his attention back to Morgan. "Mike, we're here for an interview, remember?" "Sorry, Mama." Mike folded his hands in his lap, those yellow gloves squeaking slightly. Morgan studied them. Janet met his gaze. Mike looked around the study with undisguised wonder, at the globe, the leather-bound books, the telescope. Not once did his eyes drift back to the cash. It was like he'd seen it, acknowledged it, and moved on to things that actually interested him. "Mrs. Patterson speaks highly of you," Morgan said, still watching Mike from the corner of his eye. "She says you cleaned her daughter's house for 3 years. Never missed a day. Never broke anything." "Yes, sir." "Why'd you leave?" "Her daughter moved to Oregon. I need to stay here. Mike's in a good school. We have stability." "Stability?" Morgan leaned back. "What's your current situation?" Janet hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I clean 3 houses Monday through Friday. Weekends I work at a grocery store. Mike stays with my neighbor Mrs. Chun, but she's visiting family for the summer. I have no backup childcare. And you thought bringing a 7-year-old to a job interview was appropriate?" Color rose in Janet's cheeks, but her voice stayed steady. "No, sir. It wasn't my first choice. It was my only choice. If that disqualifies me, I understand." Morgan turned his attention to Mike. The boy was looking at the books on the shelf behind Morgan, trying to read the titles. "You, boy, what do you do while your mother works?" Mike straightened. "I help, sir. I can dust and mop and put things away neat. Mama says I'm real good at organizing." "You steal anything from the houses she cleans?" "Morgan." Janet started to stand, face flushed with anger. "No, ma'am." Mike's voice cut through, calm and clear. He looked directly at Morgan, and for just a second, his eyes flicked to that glass shelf, then back. "Mama says we don't take what ain't ours. Not even if nobody's looking. Especially if nobody's looking. 'Cause that's when you find out who you really are." The room went quiet. Janet stared at her son. Morgan stared at her son. Even Mrs. Patterson, still standing in the doorway, stared at the boy. $20,000 on the wall. A 7-year-old boy who'd looked at it and chosen to talk about telescopes instead. Morgan leaned forward. "Your mother teach you that?" "Yes, sir. And my grandpa before he died. He said character is what you do when you think nobody's watching. And God's always watching anyway, so you might as well be good." "Smart grandpa." "Yes, sir. He was real smart. He didn't have much money, but Mama says he was rich in ways that mattered." Morgan felt something crack in his chest. Something small but significant. Like ice beginning to thaw. Morgan made his decision. "Mrs. Patterson retires Friday. You start Monday. 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monday through Friday. $15 an hour." The boy can stay if he doesn't break anything, doesn't touch anything valuable, and stays out of my way. Deal. Janet's eyes widened. Mr. David, yes. Yes, thank you. You won't regret. I regret most things, Morgan interrupted, standing to signal the interview was over. Don't give me another reason. They left. Morgan watched them walk to their rusted Civic. Janet knelt down, hugged her son tight, then buckled him into the back seat with care that spoke of love so fierce it was almost visible. Morgan turned away from the window. 4 days until they started. 4 days to prepare the real test. Because that pretty speech Mike gave, that rehearsed line about character when nobody's watching, Morgan would see if the boy meant it. He'd see what Mike did when he thought nobody was watching. He always did. Want to see what happens when Morgan sets his trap? Drop a like and subscribe. Please write your thoughts in the comment section. Monday morning, 7 a.m. sharp. Janet and Mike arrived in the same Honda Civic with the dented door. Morgan watched from the upstairs window as Mike climbed out wearing those yellow rubber gloves, carrying a small backpack. Mrs. Patterson had left detailed instructions, a schedule, and her blessing. Janet's good people, Mr. David. Give her a chance. Then she'd hugged him, the first physical affection he'd received in months, and walked out of his life. Now it was just Morgan, Janet, Mike, and $20,000 on a glass shelf. Janet started in the East Wing. Morgan tracked her movements through the mansion, methodical, thorough, respectful. She didn't open drawers she wasn't supposed to clean, didn't linger in rooms longer than necessary, just worked. Mike followed her with his cleaning supplies, yellow gloves squeaking as he tried to help. He was too short to reach most surfaces, but he tried anyway, dusting baseboards on his knees, organizing books that had fallen, straightening picture frames. Morgan watched from his study, door cracked. The boy passed his study 3 times that first morning. Each time, Mike glanced at the glass shelf, natural curiosity, then kept moving. No stopping. No staring. No calculating. By Wednesday, Morgan noticed something else. Mike sang while he cleaned. Quiet, off-key hymns his grandmother probably taught him. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. The sound echoed through empty hallways that hadn't heard music in 5 years. Thursday, Morgan left a $50 bill on the hallway table, deliberately visible. He watched from the security camera as Janet and Mike walked past it. Janet saw it, picked it up, folded it carefully, and left it on Morgan's desk with a note. Found this in the hallway. Didn't want it to get lost. Janet. Friday afternoon, Morgan made his decision. The real test would happen Monday. He'd stage it perfectly. Pretend to sleep in his study. Leave everything accessible. The glass shelf. The wallet. The watch. Everything. Then he'd see what the boy did when opportunity met temptation with nobody watching. Because everyone broke eventually. Even 7-year-olds with yellow gloves and hymns. Monday morning felt different. Heavier somehow. Morgan prepared his study like a stage. The glass shelf, already positioned perfectly. His wallet on the desk, open, cash visible. His Rolex beside it. Reading glasses worth more than Janet's monthly rent. His prescription bottles with his name clearly visible. Everything within arm's reach of where a curious boy might wander. Morgan positioned himself in his leather chair, angled so he could watch the door through barely opened eyes. He'd perfected this technique over the years. Look asleep but see everything. He heard Janet downstairs, starting her morning routine. He heard Mike's voice. Mama, can I clean Mr. David's study today? I'll be real careful. Janet's response was too quiet to make out, but minutes later, small footsteps approached. Morgan's heart rate increased. This was it. The moment of truth. The moment when innocence would crack and reveal what he already knew. Everyone takes what they can get. The door creaked open slowly. Yellow gloves appeared first, then Mike's small frame carrying a dust cloth and spray bottle. The boy froze when he saw Morgan sleeping in the chair. For a long moment, Mike just stood there. Morgan watched through slitted eyes. The boy's gaze moved around the room. The books, the telescope, the globe. Then it landed on the glass shelf. $20,000. Mike stared at it. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Morgan waited for the boy to move closer. To touch it. To count it. To take it. Instead, Mike looked at the sleeping Morgan, then back at the money. His young face showed something Morgan didn't expect. Not desire, but concern. The boy bit his lip, adjusted his 2 big gloves, and made his decision. He started cleaning. Mike moved through the study like he'd been trained by professionals. Quiet. Careful. Respectful of the sleeping man. He dusted the bookshelf first, standing on his toes to reach higher shelves, yellow gloves making his movements clumsy but determined. He didn't touch Morgan's desk. Didn't go near the wallet or the Rolex. Didn't even glance at them. Morgan's chest felt tight. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The boy should be curious. Should be tempted. Should be proving Morgan's worldview correct. Mike cleaned the window sill, wiped down the telescope gently, organized the books that had fallen on the side table. All of it quiet. All of it careful. All of it done while actively avoiding anything valuable. Then Mike noticed something. Morgan's suit jacket had slipped off his shoulder, hanging awkwardly. The boy stopped, dustcloth in hand, and stared at the jacket. Morgan felt his breath catch. Here it comes. The boy would go through the pockets. Check for cash. Check for. Mike walked over slowly, reached up with those yellow-gloved hands, and gently, so gently, adjusted the jacket back onto Morgan's shoulder, tucking it carefully so the old man wouldn't get cold. Morgan's eyes burned. No, this wasn't right. This wasn't how people were. Mike continued cleaning. He picked up Morgan's reading glasses that had fallen on the floor. Those $1,200 custom-made glasses, and instead of pocketing them or accidentally breaking them, the boy used the clean part of his shirt to wipe the lenses carefully. Then he placed them on the table within Morgan's reach. The boy saw Morgan's feet and disappeared for a moment. He returned with a throw blanket from the couch in the corner, the one Margaret had knitted before she got sick, and draped it over Morgan's legs with the careful attention of someone who understood what it meant to care for another person. Morgan wasn't watching a test anymore. He was watching something he thought had died with Margaret. He was watching kindness. Real, uncalculated, pure kindness. Mike finished dusting and was about to leave when he noticed the medication bottles on the side table. Next to them was a note from Janet in her careful handwriting. Mr. David, 3 p.m. medicine. Please don't forget. Mike checked the clock on the wall. 3:07 p.m. The boy's face grew serious. He looked at the sleeping Morgan, then at the medicine bottles, then back at the clock. Morgan watched the boy's internal debate play out on his young face. Finally, Mike set down his cleaning supplies and approached the medication. He picked up each bottle carefully, reading the labels with concentration, his lips moving as he sounded out the difficult medical words. His small fingers counted out pills. 1 from this bottle, 2 from that one, half of another, exactly as the labels instructed. He filled a glass with water from the bathroom sink, tested it with his finger to make sure it wasn't too cold, then placed both the pills in a small cup and the water glass on the table next to Morgan's chair. But Mike didn't stop there. The boy pulled out a piece of paper and a crayon from his backpack, supplies he must have brought for coloring during breaks. He sat on the floor using a book as a hard surface and began to write. His handwriting was painstaking, careful, each letter formed with the concentration only a 7-year-old brings to important tasks. When he finished, Mike placed the note next to the medicine. He stood there for a moment, looking at the sleeping billionaire with an expression of such genuine concern that Morgan felt something inside him crack wide open. Then Mike did one more thing. He walked to the glass shelf, that shelf with $20,000, and gently dusted around it. His yellow glove came within inches of the cash. One swipe. One grab. That's all it would take. Mike cleaned the glass carefully, making sure not to smudge it, then stepped back to admire his work. There, he whispered to himself. All clean for Mr. David. He gathered his supplies, took one last look at the medicine setup to make sure it was perfect, then tiptoed out of the study, closing the door with barely a sound. Morgan sat frozen in his chair. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he'd just witnessed. After a full minute of silence, he opened his eyes completely. His hands were shaking as he reached for the note Mike had left. The handwriting was uneven, some letters bigger than others, some words misspelled. But the message was clear. Mr. David, Mama says your medicine keeps your heart strong. I left it here. Please take it. You are a nice man for giving Mama a job. Thank you. Mike. At the bottom, drawn in green crayon, was a lumpy heart. Morgan picked up the note with trembling hands. He read it once, twice, 3 times. Each word was a hammer blow to everything he'd believed for 5 years. The glass shelf gleamed on the wall. $20,000. Untouched. Not even considered. The wallet on his desk. Open. Cash visible. Untouched. The Rolex. The expensive glasses. Everything he'd laid out as bait. All of it ignored in favor of making sure an old man took his medicine and didn't get cold. Morgan's vision blurred. Tears, actual tears, formed in his eyes for the first time since Margaret's funeral. They spilled over, running down his weathered cheeks, dripping onto Mike's crayon drawing of a heart. He'd tested everyone for 5 years. Every single person had failed. Every single person proved his cynicism correct. Except a 7-year-old boy with yellow gloves who was too busy caring about an old man's health to notice $20,000 an arm's length away. Morgan buried his face in his hands and sobbed. Great, shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken inside him. Sobs for Margaret. Sobs for 5 years of loneliness and bitterness. Sobs for every person he'd tested and every person who'd failed. Sobs for the walls he'd built and the heart he'd closed. But most of all, he cried because a child had just shown him what he'd forgotten. That goodness wasn't dead. It was just rare, precious, real. And he'd almost missed it because he'd been too busy looking for thieves to recognize a guardian angel in yellow rubber gloves. Morgan didn't know how long he sat there, Mike's note clutched in his hand, tears streaming down his face. It could have been minutes. Could have been an hour. Time had lost meaning in the face of what had just happened. Finally, he stood on shaky legs. He looked at the glass shelf, his pride, his test, his proof that people were terrible. Now it looked different. Not like evidence. Like a monument to his own brokenness. He walked to his desk and pressed the intercom. His voice came out rough, thick with emotion. "Janet, could you and Mike come to my study, please?" There was a pause. "Yes, Mr. David. Is everything all right? Just please come." He could hear the worry in her voice as she agreed. Morgan sat back down, not behind his power desk, but in the regular chair by the window. The one where equals sit. Footsteps approached. Janet appeared first, Mike behind her clutching her hand. Both of them looked terrified. Janet's eyes went immediately to Morgan's face, his red eyes, his wet cheeks, and her expression shifted to alarm. "Mr. David, what's wrong? Are you hurt? Should I call?" "No." Morgan's voice cracked. "Please. Both of you. Sit." They sat on the couch, Mike practically in his mother's lap, his yellow gloves squeaking as he gripped her arm. The boy looked like he was bracing for punishment, like he'd done something wrong. That made Morgan's heart hurt even more. "Mike," Morgan said softly. The boy flinched. "Did you clean my study this afternoon?" Mike nodded, eyes wide. "Yes, sir. I was real careful. Did I break something?" "I didn't mean to, I promise I." "No, son. You didn't break anything." Morgan had to pause, collect himself. Did you prepare my medicine?" Mike nodded again, slower this time. "The clock said 3:07 and the note said 3 o'clock, so I thought maybe you forgot 'cause you were sleeping. Mama says old people." He stopped, looked at Janet nervously. "I mean, Mama says grown-ups need their medicine on time, or they can get sick." "Old people is accurate," Morgan said with a watery smile. "And you're right. I did forget. I didn't touch nothing else, Mr. David." Mike blurted out, pointing at the desk. "I saw your wallet and your watch and that money on the shelf, but Mama says we don't touch what ain't ours. I just wanted to make sure you took your medicine and didn't get cold. That's all. I promise." Janet's face had gone pale as she realized what had happened. "Mike, were you alone in here with Mr. David's things?" "I was cleaning, Mama. I was being real careful." Janet turned to Morgan, standing up, pulling Mike behind her protectively. "Mr. David, I understand what this looks like. But I swear to you, I taught my son better than." "Janet." Morgan's voice stopped her. "Stop. Please. Just stop." He stood and walked toward them. Both mother and son looked ready to run. Morgan knelt down, his knees protesting, but he did it anyway, so he was at Mike's eye level. "Mike, do you know what I did today?" The boy shook his head. "I pretended to be asleep. I was testing you. I wanted to see what you would do when you thought nobody was watching." Mike's eyes went even wider. "You were awake?" "Yes. I saw everything you did." "Oh." Mike's voice got very small. "Am I in trouble?" Morgan felt tears forming again. "No, son. You're not in trouble." "I am." Morgan stayed on his knees, hands clasped in front of him like a penitent in confession. Janet and Mike stared at him, this billionaire on the floor of his own study crying. "For 5 years," Morgan began, voice shaking, "I have tested everyone who entered this house. My family, my friends, my employees, everyone. I left money visible, left valuables within reach. I watched them all through cameras and through cracked doors, just like I watched you today, Mike. And do you know what happened?" Mike shook his head slowly. "They all took something. All of them. My nephew stole $2 million. My lawyer stole from my accounts. My business partner tried to forge my signature on property documents. Staff members pocketed jewelry, sold stories about me to newspapers, betrayed every trust one placed in them. He gestured to the glass shelf. That money up there? That's not decoration. It's a trap. A test. $20,000 sitting there, waiting for someone to show me they're just like everyone else. Janet's hand covered her mouth. Mr. David. I watched you for a week, Morgan continued, looking at her now. I watched you clean around that money like it was just another object. I watched you find a $50 bill and return it instead of keeping it. I watched you both work hard and ask for nothing. And you know what I thought? Neither of them answered. I thought you were just better at hiding it. I thought eventually you'd show your true colors like everyone else. So today I set up the ultimate test. I left everything accessible. I pretended to sleep. I waited for Mike to take something, to go through my pockets, to count that money on the shelf. Morgan's voice broke completely. And instead, that beautiful boy covered me with a blanket so I wouldn't get cold. Tears rolled down his cheeks freely now. He adjusted my jacket, cleaned my glasses, prepared my medicine because he was worried about my health. He wrote me a note calling me a nice man when I've been anything but. He dusted around $20,000 like it was invisible because he was more concerned about an old man's medicine than about money. Morgan looked directly at Mike. You showed me something I thought died with my wife. You showed me that good people still exist. That kindness is real. That not everyone is trying to take something from me. He turned back to Janet. And I am so sorry. I'm sorry for testing you. I'm sorry for doubting you. I'm sorry for being a bitter, cynical old man who forgot what goodness looked like. The study was silent except for Morgan's ragged breathing. Finally, Mike spoke up, his small voice cutting through the heavy air. Mr. David, why are you crying? Morgan smiled through his tears. Because, son, you just saved me. From what? From myself. Morgan slowly got to his feet, his knees aching. He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out his checkbook. Janet tensed. Mr. David, if you're firing us. Firing you. Morgan looked shocked. Janet, I'm about to ask you something, and I need you to hear me clearly. He wrote out a check, his hand still shaking. He folded it and handed it to Janet. This is a signing bonus. It's for Mike's college fund. All of it. Every penny. Janet unfolded the check and gasped. Mr. David, this is $50,000. It's a start, Morgan said. I'm also tripling your salary as of today. Full benefits. Healthcare for both of you. Paid vacation. Sick leave. Everything. Why would you? Because I need you to stay. Both of you. Morgan's voice dropped to almost a whisper. This mansion has been empty for 5 years. Dead. No laughter, no music, no life. Your son sings hymns while he dusts. Do you know what that sounds like in halls that have only heard silence? Janet was crying now too, clutching the check. Morgan knelt down again, this time in front of Mike. Son, can I ask you something? Yes, sir. Why didn't you take any of that money? You could have grabbed a few bills. I wouldn't have noticed. Your mother wouldn't have known. You could have bought toys, games, anything you wanted. Why didn't you? Mike looked confused by the question, like Morgan had asked why he didn't fly. Because it ain't mine. But nobody would have known. I would have known. And God would have known. And then I would have felt bad every time I played with the toy I bought with your money. Mike's 7-year-old logic was airtight. Mama says money you don't earn burns your hands. I don't want burned hands. Morgan laughed, actually laughed, for the first time and he couldn't remember how long. Your mama is very wise. Yes, sir. The wisest. Morgan stood and walked to the glass shelf. He looked at the $20,000, his test, his trap, his proof of human failure. He pulled every bill down, stack by stack, and carried them to his desk. Janet, take Mike to the kitchen. Mrs. Patterson left cookies in the jar. Help yourself. Janet hesitated. Mr. David. Please. I need a moment. They left, Mike's yellow gloves squeaking as he walked. Morgan waited until they were gone, then pulled out his phone. He called his accountant. Davis, I need you to set up a trust fund. Beneficiary, Michael Jackson, age 7. Amount, $1 million. Accessible for college, housing, medical expenses, and business ventures. Yes, I'm serious. Do it today. He hung up and looked at the cash on his desk. Then he looked at the empty glass shelf on the wall. That shelf had been his shrine to cynicism for 5 years. Not anymore. He called Janet back in, Mike trailing behind her, cookie in hand. Janet, I'm taking that shelf down. I don't need it anymore. Sir, that test is over. I'm done testing people. I'm done looking for the worst in everyone. He looked at Mike. Your son taught me something important today. He taught me that the way I've been living, suspicious, bitter, alone, that's not protecting me. It's killing me. He walked to Mike and held out his hand. Mike, may I borrow your gloves for a moment? Confused, Mike pulled off the yellow rubber gloves and handed them to Morgan. They were warm from the boy's small hands, worn from hard work, too big for a child but perfect for a boy trying to help his mother. Morgan held them gently like they were sacred. In a way, they were. These gloves, Morgan said quietly, represent something I forgot. Hard work, humility, service, caring for others without asking what's in it for you. He looked at Mike. Son, you don't need to clean my house anymore. You're 7. You should be playing, being a kid. But I like helping Mama. I know you do. And that's beautiful. But from now on, when you come here, I want you to use my library, my telescope, my games. I want you to be a child, not a worker. He handed the gloves back to Mike. Keep these. Not for cleaning. Keep them to remember that you did something important today. You reminded an old fool that goodness still exists in this world. Mike took the gloves carefully. You're not a fool, Mr. David. You're just sad. My mama was sad when Grandpa died. But she got happy again. You can too. Morgan's breath caught. Out of the mouths of babes. You're right, Mike. I have been sad. Very sad. But today you made me a little less sad. Good. Mike smiled, his whole face lighting up. Sad is no fun. Happy is better. Much better, Morgan agreed. 3 months later, Morgan's study looked different. The glass shelf was still there, but now it held photographs. Margaret smiling on their wedding day. Margaret in the garden she'd loved. And new photos too. Janet and Mike at Mike's school achievement ceremony. Mike looking through the telescope, mouth open in wonder. Janet laughing at something Morgan had said over dinner. Because now they had dinner together. Every Friday. Sometimes just the 3 of them, sometimes Mrs. Patterson would join them, sometimes other staff Morgan had hired. Good people he'd learned to trust again. The mansion wasn't silent anymore. Mike's hymns echoed through the halls most weekdays. Janet hummed while she worked. Sometimes Morgan played old records Margaret had loved, and the music filled spaces that had been empty for too long. The cash was gone. Morgan had donated it to a scholarship fund for children from single-parent households. The fund was called the Yellow Glove Scholarship, and Mike had laughed so hard when Morgan told him that juice came out of his nose. Morgan had changed too. He smiled more, laughed more. He'd reconnected with old friends, carefully, slowly, but genuinely. He'd forgiven his nephew, though he didn't give him money. Forgiveness doesn't mean foolishness, Janet had advised, and she was right. Now, on a Tuesday afternoon, Morgan sat in his study reading when Mike burst in after school, still wearing his backpack. Mr. David, I got an A on my science project. That's wonderful, Mike. What was the project? Stars. I used your telescope for research. Mrs. Chen helped me make a poster. Mike had a new caretaker situation now. Mrs. Chen charged Janet far less than she should have, and Morgan had quietly paid the difference. Some things Mike and Janet still didn't need to know about. I'm very proud of you, son. Mike beamed, then noticed something. Mr. David, your medicine. Did you take it? Morgan checked the clock. 2:55 p.m. 5 minutes early, but the boy worried. Not yet. Wanna help me? They went through the routine together. Mike reading labels seriously, Morgan explaining what each pill did. It had become their thing. Their ritual. After Morgan took his medicine, Mike lingered. Mr. David, can I ask you something? Anything. That day you pretended to be asleep. Were you really testing me? Morgan set down his water glass. They'd never talked about it in detail after that first conversation. Yes, I was. Did I pass? Mike, you didn't just pass. You taught the teacher. Mike thought about this. What did I teach you? Morgan looked at the shelf, at the photos where cash used to be. You taught me that the way people treat you when you're vulnerable, when you're sleeping or sick or weak, that's who they really are. And you, son, are one of the best people I've ever met. Even though I'm just 7? Especially because you're 7. You haven't learned how to be selfish yet. I hope you never do. Mike climbed into the chair next to Morgan's, his feet dangling above the ground. Mr. David, do you still think everyone's bad? No, Mike. I think most people are like you and your mother. Good people trying their best. I was just too hurt to see it for a while. But you see it now. I do. Thanks to a boy with yellow gloves. Mike grinned. Those gloves are retired now. Mama got me new ones that fit, but I kept the old ones. They're in my closet. Mama says they're a memory. A good memory, I hope. The best. That was the day you became my friend. Morgan felt his eyes sting. Is that what I am? Your friend? Well, yeah. You let me use your telescope. You eat dinner with us. You help Mama. You ask about my school. That's what friends do. Morgan cleared his throat. Then yes, Mike. I'm your friend. I'm honored to be your friend. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, an old billionaire and a young boy, bound together by yellow gloves and a test that became a transformation. Finally, Janet called from downstairs. Mike! Time to go home, honey. Mike hopped down from the chair. Bye, Mr. David. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow, son. Mike ran out, his backpack bouncing, his voice already launching into Jesus loves me, as he bounded down the stairs. Morgan stood and walked to the window. He watched Janet and Mike get into their Honda, not the rusty one anymore. Morgan had quietly arranged for a dealer to make a mistake on a trade-in, and now Janet drove a reliable 2018 model. She still didn't know he'd been behind it. As they drove away, Mike waved frantically from the back window. Morgan waved back. He turned back to his study, to the shelf with photos instead of cash, to the telescope Mike used every week, to the medicine bottles Mike helped him organize, to the note, that precious crayon note, now framed on his desk. The mansion wasn't silent anymore. It was alive. And so was Morgan David. He walked to his desk and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts and found a number he hadn't called in 2 years. His sister. They'd had a falling out over money, over suspicion, over Morgan's inability to trust anyone. He pressed call. Hello. Sarah, it's Morgan. I wanted to apologize. I've been wrong about a lot of things. Could we talk? There was a pause, then his sister's voice, thick with emotion. Oh, Morgan. Yes. Yes, we can talk. They talked for an hour. Morgan explained what had happened, what Mike had taught him, how he was trying to be better. Sarah cried. Morgan cried. They made plans to meet for lunch next week. When he hung up, Morgan looked at the empty glass shelf one more time. That shelf had collected evidence of human failure for 5 years. Now it collected evidence of human goodness. Yellow gloves had defeated $20,000. A child's kindness had defeated 5 years of cynicism. And an old man who thought he was dead inside had learned to live again. Morgan David walked to the window and looked out at his gardens. The ones Margaret had planted, the ones he'd neglected, the ones Janet had slowly been bringing back to life. Tomorrow, he'd ask Janet if Mike wanted to plant something. Maybe tomatoes. Maybe flowers. Something living that they could grow together. Because that's what Morgan had learned from a 7-year-old boy with yellow gloves too big for his hands. Growth isn't about what you accumulate. It's about what you cultivate. And the best things in life, trust, kindness, family, can't be bought, tested, or displayed on a glass shelf. The Yellow Glove Scholarship has now helped 47 children from single-parent households attend college. Morgan David established it with the $20,000 that used to sit on his glass shelf, plus $5 million more. Mike Jackson graduated high school with honors. He's now studying astronomy at MIT on a full scholarship. The one Morgan set up the day a 7-year-old taught him what wealth really means. Janet Jackson is now Morgan's director of household operations, overseeing a staff of 12. She's also his friend, his voice of reason, and the closest thing to family he has besides his sister Sarah, who he reconciled with fully. Morgan David lived 8 more years after meeting Mike. They were, he told everyone who would listen, the best years of his life. He died peacefully in his study, surrounded by photos of people he loved, with Mike, now 15, holding his hand. Mike inherited the telescope. The house became a foundation for underprivileged youth. The glass shelf was donated to a museum with a plaque that read, "This shelf once held $20,000 as a test of human greed." A 7-year-old boy with yellow gloves taught its owner to fill it with love instead. The yellow gloves are still in Mike's closet. He's 24 now, but he keeps them as a reminder. Character is what you do when you think nobody's watching. And sometimes somebody's always watching, even if they're just pretending to sleep. What would you have done if you were Mike? Would you have taken the money? Been honest. Something else? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story reminded you that goodness still exists, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about kindness, redemption, and the moment when everything changes. New stories every day.